The summer of 1992 in Birmingham, Alabama, shimmered with the kind of oppressive humidity that glued clothes to skin and slowed the world to a languid crawl. For 7-year-old Michael Davis, known to everyone as Mikey, it was simply the season of endless play, of scraped knees and sticky popsicle fingers. Mikey was a blur of energy, a small dynamo with a shock of sandy blonde hair and a gap-toothed grin that could melt any adult's resolve. He lived in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood just south of downtown, a place where screen doors slammed, cicadas hummed a relentless symphony, and the biggest worry was usually whether the ice cream truck would make its rounds before dark. His parents, Sarah and Tom Davis, had carved out a comfortable life on Elm Street, a haven of normalcy. Tom worked long hours as a project manager for a local construction firm, overseeing developments that slowly crept into the surrounding Alabama landscape. Sarah managed the bustling household, her days filled with laundry, cooking, and chasing after Mikey and his younger sister, Emily, who was barely 2 and just starting to walk with wobbly enthusiasm. Mikey's world was a small, well-defined circle. His house, the sprawling oak tree in the front yard that was his castle, Mr. Henderson's perfectly manicured lawn next door that was forbidden territory, and the creek at the edge of the neighborhood woods, a magical boundary he was strictly told never to cross alone. But like most 7-year-olds, rules were sometimes mere suggestions, particularly when adventure called. His best friend, Billy Jensen, lived 2 houses down, and their days were a blur of bicycle races down the gentle slopes of Elm Street, trading baseball cards on Billy's porch swing, and concocting elaborate plans to catch the biggest bullfrog down by the creek. Mikey was an imaginative boy, often lost in worlds of his own creation, armed with a stick for a sword and a boundless sense of wonder. The morning of July 18, 1992, dawned like any other sweltering Saturday. The smell of fresh coffee brewed by Tom mingled with Sarah's pancakes, wafting through the modest ranch-style home. Mikey, already in his faded denim shorts and a brightly colored t-shirt, devoured his breakfast with the speed of someone eager to rejoin the battle against unseen foes in the backyard. Emily gurgled happily in her high chair, occasionally throwing bits of pancake onto the floor, much to Mikey's amusement. After breakfast, Mikey and Billy had plans. They were going to explore the small patch of woods behind Billy's house, a wooded area that bordered a shallow ravine before giving way to more residential streets further south. It wasn't the vast wilderness of Oak Mountain State Park, but for 2 young boys, it was an untamed jungle. Sarah, preoccupied with getting Emily down for her nap in an overflowing laundry basket, gave Mikey the usual warnings. "Stay with Billy, don't go near the creek, be back before lunch." Mikey, barely listening, nodded vigorously, grabbed his worn baseball cap and burst out the door. He paused just long enough to shout, "Bye, Mom," before his small frame vanished around the corner of the house, his sneakers pounding a rhythmic tattoo on the pavement. Sarah smiled, a familiar warmth spreading through her chest. It was the sound of a happy childhood, the soundtrack to 1,000 summer days. She folded a tiny onesie, humming a soft tune, completely unaware that this ordinary morning was about to unravel into an abyss from which her family would never truly escape. Lunchtime approached, marked by the rising sun in the sky and the growing rumbling in Sarah's stomach. She called for Mikey, her voice echoing down Elm Street, but no answer came. A slight worry pricked at her, a familiar maternal unease. Sometimes Mikey got caught up in play, forgetting the time. She walked over to Billy's house, a familiar route. Mrs. Jensen answered the door, a friendly smile on her face that quickly faded when Sarah asked if Mikey was still there. "Oh no, Sarah. Billy said Mikey went home hours ago, around 11, said he had to finish his chores." A cold knot tightened in Sarah's stomach. Chores? Mikey rarely hurried home for chores. He certainly hadn't come inside. Panic, cold and sharp, began to claw at her. She raced back home, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Tom." "Mikey's not back," she cried, her voice laced with a fear she hadn't known possible. Tom, who had just returned from a quick run to the hardware store, looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "He wasn't with Billy." Together, they began a frantic search. They called Billy again, who tearfully confirmed Mikey had left him at the edge of the woods around 11:15 a.m., saying his mom had called him for lunch, though Sarah swore she hadn't. They canvassed the immediate neighborhood, knocking on doors, their voices growing hoarse as they repeated Mikey's description. The neighbors, initially calm, soon caught on to the rising urgency in Sarah and Tom's eyes. Faces grew grim. People emerged from their homes, joining the search, calling out Mikey's name. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the Alabama sky in hues of orange and purple, the fear coalesced into a terrifying certainty. Mikey was not just late, he was gone. At 6:47 p.m., a trembling Sarah Davis called the Birmingham Police Department. The dispatcher, her voice calm but firm, took down the details. Within the hour, two uniformed officers arrived, their presence a stark, official reminder of the horror unfolding. Detective Sergeant Robert Maxwell, a seasoned veteran with a weary but sharp gaze, arrived shortly after. He took charge, his notepad already filling with questions. When did you last see him, Mrs. Davis? What was he wearing? Any arguments? Any strangers in the neighborhood recently? The questions felt like an interrogation, each one twisting the knife of parental guilt deeper. The initial investigation was a whirlwind of activity and desperate hope. Patrol cars converged on Elm Street, their blue and red lights flashing silently in the twilight. A grid search was organized, covering every yard, every bush, every ditch within a 2-block radius. Volunteers from the neighborhood and surrounding areas, alerted by word of mouth and local news, joined the effort, forming human chains to comb the wooded areas. The local news vans arrived, their satellite dishes extended like metallic sunflowers, turning the private tragedy into a public spectacle. Sarah and Tom, their faces etched with grief and exhaustion, made tearful appeals on television, holding up Mikey's school picture, his bright smile a cruel contrast to their despair. Days bled into weeks, the initial fervor slowly receded, replaced by a grim, methodical grind. The FBI was called in, adding their resources, but even their expertise couldn't conjure a trace of the boy. They interviewed every neighbor, every known sex offender in the county, every person who had even glanced in Mikey's direction that morning. Billy Jensen was questioned repeatedly, his innocent account consistent, though tainted by a child's fading memory of specific times and details. Dogs trained to track human scent were brought in, but their trails went cold near the edge of the woods behind Billy's house, only to dissipate in a confused pattern, suggesting either Mikey had been picked up there or his scent was simply overwhelmed by the environment. The creek, a forbidden sanctuary for Mikey, was dredged. Nothing. The small patches of woods meticulously searched. Nothing. The case moved from a missing child to a potential abduction, then to a deeply puzzling mystery with no leads. There was no ransom note, no witnesses to a struggle, no discarded items. It was as if Mikey had simply evaporated into the humid Alabama air. The yellow, missing posters, featuring Mikey's smiling face, were plastered everywhere. On utility poles, in store windows, at gas stations. They faded under the relentless southern sun, their edges curling, a tangible representation of the dwindling hope. The Davis household became a mausoleum of grief. Mikey's bedroom remained untouched, a shrine to his vanished presence. His toys lay exactly where he'd left them, a half-built Lego castle, a stack of comic books, a well-loved baseball glove on his bed. Sarah would often sit on the edge of his bed, breathing in the faint scent of boy in summer, tears silently streaming down her face. Tom, a man known for his stoicism, retreated into himself, his once strong shoulders now slumped under an invisible weight. The laughter vanished from their home, replaced by a suffocating silence punctuated only by Emily's innocent chatter, a sound that sometimes pierced the despair with a strange, bittersweet ache. The strain on Sarah and Tom's marriage was immense. Each silently blamed the other, not with accusations, but with the crushing weight of unspoken guilt. If I hadn't been so busy with laundry, if I had just come home 5 minutes earlier, they became ghosts in their own home, moving through the motions of life but truly living only in the past, replaying every moment of July 18th, searching for the clue they must have missed. The community, initially supportive with casseroles and comforting words, eventually pulled back. Life, stubbornly, moved on for everyone else. Sympathy turned to awkward silence, then to a quiet avoidance. The Davises became a painful reminder of the fragility of life, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. Years passed, stretching like an endless, desolate highway. 1993, 1994, 1995. Emily grew from a toddler into a bright, inquisitive child, asking questions about the other brother she saw in pictures, the one whose room was always locked, whose name was sometimes spoken with a catch in her mother's throat. Sarah and Tom became involuntary advocates for missing children, attending conferences, joining support groups, their private anguish transformed into a public mission to ensure no other family endured their torment. Detective Maxwell, who had never let the case truly go cold, periodically revisited the file, his desk drawer holding a worn photo of Mikey, a constant, silent reproach. New technologies emerged in law enforcement, DNA forensics becoming more refined, but without a body, without a single piece of physical evidence, they were tools without a purpose. The official status of Michael Davis was missing person, but in the hearts of his parents, he was simply gone. By 2003, 11 years had carved deep lines into Sarah and Tom's faces, etching their grief into every feature. The world had moved into a new millennium, but for them, time had stopped on that suffocating summer day. Mikey would have been 18, a young man on the cusp of adulthood. They often wondered what he would have looked like, what his dreams would have been, a phantom future haunting their every waking moment. The faded posters were long gone, replaced by digital pleas on early internet forums, but the hope, a tiny flicker that refused to die completely, was thin and ragged. Then on a crisp autumn afternoon in late October 2003, the phone call came. It was Detective Maxwell, his voice gruff, his tone carefully measured, betraying a hint of something Sarah couldn't quite decipher. "Mrs. Davis, we may have something. It's about Mikey." Her breath hitched in her throat. After 11 years of false hopes, anonymous tips leading to dead ends, and the crushing weight of silence, a single sentence had the power to shatter her fragile composure. The something was uncovered by a group of teenage boys cutting through a particularly dense, overgrown patch of woods on the outskirts of Vestavia Hills, not far from Mikey's old neighborhood, though a good 2 miles from Elm Street. This particular area, a forgotten ravine that funneled into a larger, forested creek bed, was known locally as a spot for illicit bonfires and teenage mischief, but it was rarely traversed by casual hikers or search parties. It was precisely the kind of overlooked, wild pocket of nature that existed even within a bustling metropolitan area, a place where the suburban sprawl gave way to untamed wilderness, often used as an informal dumping ground for yard waste and forgotten belongings. One of the boys, kicking at a pile of discarded branches and leaves, dislodged something that wasn't natural. It was a tattered, faded piece of fabric, partially buried in the damp earth. Curiosity piqued, he dug deeper, his hands brushing against something harder, more substantial. What they unearthed sent a chilling jolt through them. It was a small, child's backpack, its bright colors muted by years of exposure to the elements, its fabric degraded and stained. Next to it, tangled in a thicket of roots and decaying vegetation, lay what appeared to be fragments of clothing. A small, denim-like material and a patch of faded blue, strikingly similar to the color of Mikey's baseball cap. And then the unmistakable, horrifying discovery, a small, skeletal foot still encased in a child's sneaker. The police response was immediate and overwhelming. The scene was quickly secured, a vast area of the woods cordoned off with bright yellow tape, illuminated by the harsh glare of portable floodlights as night fell. The initial forensic team, followed by the county coroner and anthropologists, worked meticulously, sifting through the leaves and soil with painstaking care. It was a grim archaeological dig, piecing together the fragments of a lost life. Over the next few days, more remains were uncovered, a partial skeleton, small and fragile, clearly belonging to a child. The backpack contained nothing conclusive, just a few decaying school papers from Mikey's kindergarten year, almost illegible, and a small, rusted toy car. Dental records still available from Mikey's childhood checkups provided the grim confirmation. It was Mikey Davis. The identification brought a strange, agonizing mixture of relief and devastation to the Davis family. For 11 years, they had lived in a purgatory of not knowing. Now the certainty was a cold, hard stone in their guts. He was gone. He had been gone all along, but at least now they could bring him home. The discovery reignited the cold case with a desperate urgency. Detective Maxwell, his face grim, addressed the media, the same news channels that had covered Mikey's disappearance all those years ago. "We have recovered the remains of Michael Davis. This is now a homicide investigation." The words hung heavy in the air, confirming the worst fears. The scene itself, 11 years after the fact, presented immense challenges. The elements had ravaged any potential evidence. The small bones offered few clues beyond the cause of death, likely being blunt force trauma, though the precise instrument or timing remained elusive. There was no DNA evidence to be lifted from clothing, no fingerprints, no obvious signs of a struggle. The ravine had protected the remains from complete dispersal by animals, but it had also ensured their slow, relentless decay. The new investigation focused on the period between Mikey's last known sighting and the estimated time of death. The initial theories resurfaced, but now with a chilling clarity. Had Mikey wandered off, fallen into the ravine, and died of exposure or an accidental fall? The location, though somewhat remote, was not an impossible distance for a determined 7-year-old to walk. But the discovery of clothing and the backpack, some distance from the main skeletal remains, hinted at something more sinister. An accident would typically leave the body intact with its belongings. The disarray suggested foul play, perhaps an attempt to conceal the body. Witnesses from 1992 were re-interviewed, their memories now hazy, distorted by time. Billy Jensen, now a nervous 18-year-old, recounted his story once more, his testimony unchanged but still lacking the crucial detail of what happened after Mikey left him. The neighborhood, once united in grief, was now riddled with speculation and renewed suspicion. Old rumors resurfaced, whispers about a troubled teenager who lived nearby in '92, a transient who had been seen in the area, a local oddball. All leads that had been investigated then and led nowhere. The Davis family faced a new wave of public attention, this time tinged with a morbid curiosity. They had a funeral, a small, private affair, laying their son to rest in a quiet cemetery overlooking the hills of Birmingham. The closure they had yearned for was not the comforting balm they had imagined, but a raw, aching wound. It was the certainty of absence, the finality of death, without the justice of knowing why or who. To this day, the case of Mikey Davis remains officially open. Detective Maxwell, now nearing retirement, still keeps Mikey's file on a shelf in his office, a silent testament to the cases that haunt him. The woods where Mikey was found have since been partially cleared for a new residential development, the trees that once held his secret now gone, replaced by manicured lawns and new houses. But for the Davis family, the memory of that suffocating summer of 1992 and the chilling autumn of 2003 remains, a permanent shadow cast over their lives. They had found Mikey, but the truth of what happened to their 7-year-old boy, that fateful day in Birmingham, Alabama, continues to elude them, lost somewhere in the silent, unforgiving embrace of time.